The anime Seirei Gensouki tells the story of Haruto, a young man who experiences an accident and then awakens in another world as a homeless boy named Ryo. A few moments after waking up, there was a group of thugs who came to his place because his body odor was very disturbing. Ryo was told to get out by them, and when Ryo was outside, there were several well-dressed people who asked if he had met a girl his age. Ryo hadn't seen any other children his age. He could only give a little information about the area around him. Celia then tried using search magic to detect other magic users. As a result, she found out that Ryo possessed a large amount of energy. As thanks for answering her questions, Celia gave him a small reward. Then, when Ryo returned to the previous place, there was a man who suddenly attacked him. Fortunately, the attack didn't hit him. He was also able to fight back because his strength had awakened. In that battle, Ryo had the upper hand over his enemy, thanks to his martial arts ability and the power that had just awakened. He also managed to defeat him. After his enemy was defeated, Ryo found a young girl, a victim of kidnapping. The girl's name was Flora. When Flora regained consciousness, she begged Ryo to take her to the palace. A moment later, Flora fainted again. Ryo was forced to carry her while she was unconscious. This led to him being suspected as the culprit. He was taken to the palace for questioning. At the same time, knights were assigned to conduct an investigation. However, after failing to capture any living culprits, they designated Ryo as the suspect. He was interrogated by the vice captain of the knights to admit his involvement in Princess Flora's kidnapping. At that same time, Flora woke up in her bed. After learning everything that happened, she asked her guard to summon Ryo. However, seeing Ryo being treated poorly by the knight, the princess's guard and Celia immediately stopped the knight. After being told that Ryo was the one who saved the princess, they immediately regretted it and quickly left him. After that, Ryo was asked to meet the king. The king wanted to thank him for saving his daughter. As a reward for saving Princess Flora, Ryo was allowed to attend the Royal Academy as a scholarship student. Until now, Ryo had never learned to read, so Celia offered to teach him every day after school. Because the academy was founded specifically for nobles, almost all the students disliked him. They looked down on him because he was a commoner. Such a situation, of course, made Ryo feel uncomfortable. However, he was still able to complete his studies without any problems. Celia also always gave him support and helped Ryo so he wouldn't be pressured. Therefore, Ryo would continue to strive hard and catch up. After mastering letters and numbers, Ryo could complete his assignments easily. He could do calculations in his head because he was previously a university student. Besides being smart academically, Ryo also had unusual swordsmanship skills. Although his sword style was unknown, he managed to impress his teacher with his swordsmanship skills. When the exam results were announced, a noble child protested. Ryo was accused of cheating because he was at the top rank. Although it was troublesome, such accusations had no effect on him. Celia could also guarantee this was the result of his hard work. Celia was very proud of his achievements, but worried that there would be more students who would try to find fault with him. 5 years later, the academy held a tournament between the royal knights. Ryo was chosen as one of the participants to represent them in the tournament. When the tournament began, Ryo faced the knight he had dealings with before. The knight still held a grudge against him. He attacked Ryo seriously while releasing his anger. Meanwhile, Ryo handled it calmly. He also managed to become the winner, which made the knight feel humiliated. Celia wanted to see him immediately and celebrate his victory. However, she immediately looked disappointed because there was another female student approaching Ryo. While learning techniques to control magic power, some students laughed at Ryo because his control ability was very weak. In response, Celia showed them that their abilities were nothing special. Ryo indeed couldn't use contract magic like them, but he possessed more energy than most. After the lesson finished, they participated in exploration training. In that training, the noble child named Rodan became their leader. To shorten the travel time, he took a route that was not in accordance with the directions. As a result, they got stuck at a dead end and faced a monster summoned by someone. One of the students was hit by the monster's attack. He also bumped into Princess Flora, making her fall off a cliff. Without a second thought, Rio immediately saved her, while Rio himself let himself fall. Falling from such a height did not injure Rio. He could land safely thanks to the power within himself. A moment later, Rio went to them again, but he could no longer rejoin them because the one who pushed Flora shifted the blame onto him. Flora denied the statement, but all the students were already influenced and assumed Rio was the one who pushed her. Initially, Rio intended to graduate from the academy, but it seemed it was time for him to leave. Then, when Flora was attacked by a monster, Rio saved her again. This time, he fought seriously without hiding his true abilities. After being saved multiple times, Flora defended Rio from the various false accusations, but the other noble families didn't accept it and instead wanted to get rid of him, fearing the truth would be revealed. They dispatched someone to kill him. Rio then decided to leave the kingdom. Before leaving, he said goodbye to Celia and explained the situation he was in. Because Celia was always on his side, he would send her letters and promised he would definitely meet her again. It had been 3 days since leaving the Beltram Kingdom. Rio arrived in a neighboring country. Rio visited a trade city that was always bustling. There, he could find various foods in abundant quantities. There was one food that caught his attention. Shortly after arriving there, he found a merchant selling pasta. Food like that was familiar to him, so he assumed perhaps the person who first made it was from his original world. After that, Rio decided to buy it in large quantities. Then, the merchant suggested he go to the Rika Merchant Guild. When he arrived there, he was greeted by an employee named Latte. Then, Rio was helped to find various foods needed for his journey. Not long after, a beast person trapped him. Rio was attacked with a knife and poisoned needles with intent to kill. Rio thought he couldn't let himself be killed there, so he immediately neutralized the poison and launched a counterattack. The beast person who attacked Rio was named Latifa. She also came from Earth, reincarnated into this world as a slave. It seemed someone targeting Rio used a slavery command to try and kill him. Therefore, Rio tried to remove her collar so she would no longer target him. However, he couldn't let Latifa wander alone. After making sure she was no longer targeting him, Rio offered to take her to a land that accepts beast people. Rather than being left alone, Latifa decided to go with him. She was willing to be his slave as long as she wasn't left alone. Then, while they were camping, Latifa called the pasta spaghetti. Besides that, she also mumbled about wanting to meet her parents in Tokyo. With this, Rio could conclude Latifa was reincarnated from Earth. Therefore, he would pay more attention to her so she wouldn't be lonely. A few moments later, Rio was surrounded by the spirit forest dwellers. They blinded his vision so he couldn't fight back. As best he could, Rio explained he had no ill intentions, but they didn't believe him and instead assumed Rio was kidnapping Latifa. Because of this, they attacked without hesitation. Using spirit arts, Rio could avoid ordinary attacks, but he couldn't avoid a magic attack aimed directly at him. In an unconscious state, Rio met a mysterious woman. The woman spoke as if she knew him, while Rio knew nothing about her. It didn't take long for Rio to wake up and meet Latifa. Latifa had already given the true account, so Rio was no longer treated poorly by them. In fact, as thanks for saving their relative, Rio met directly with the elders who led the spirit folk. After speaking with the elders, the spirit of the world tree called Dryas appeared. Dryas was curious about Rio because she could feel a spirit inside him. She assumed Rio had made a contract with a spirit. But because Rio had never made a contract with a spirit, Dryas asked permission to investigate him. Then, upon further investigation, she could tell there was a humanoid spirit sleeping inside him. A humanoid spirit is extremely rare, so the elders had to reconsider how they would treat Rio. In the end, they decided to treat Rio as a holy person. While living in the spirit forest, Rio could use a comfortable house accompanied by several servants. He could also learn various knowledge that only the spirit folk possessed. In another place, forces from the Heavenly Lion group were stealing monster eggs. This resulted in the mother becoming angry and chasing them. It had been 1 year since Rio came to the village. They held a spirit festival to welcome him as their true friend. As for Latifa, she was accepted as an official resident of the village. While celebrating, Rio didn't understand why Orphea and Sarah became so clingy like this. It turned out they wanted to deepen their friendship with him. Rio would be happy to be closer with them, but he was thinking of telling them soon that he would be leaving the village. In the middle of the forest, the person who stole the monster eggs was ordered to stand guard. He was used as bait by his boss, while his boss returned to the nest to take more eggs. Because the location was close to the spirit village, this caused a commotion. The residents tried to escape from the rampaging group of wyverns. At the same time, the egg he was carrying fell near Latifah. It didn't take long for the mother wyvern to approach and rampage in front of her. Hearing Latifah scream, Alma immediately came to help her. Although her fighting ability was above average, it still wasn't enough to defeat the wyvern. As a member of the spirit village, Latifah didn't want to just stand by. She decided to be a decoy to attract the monster's attention. Then, just as the wyvern was about to attack, Rio quickly saved her and launched a counterattack. Apparently, just a bare-handed punch could send the monster flying. Then, when the monster unleashed a breath of fire, he tried to stop it with spirit arts. Seeing its reaction, Rio realized its weakness. It turned out if he attacked its mouth, the wyvern would be defeated instantly. With this, the destruction of the spirit village was prevented. But he had to leave there immediately and continue his journey to Yagumo. Before leaving, Rio said goodbye to Latifah. He was also given rare equipment by the villagers to make his journey easier. It had been 2 weeks since Rio arrived in Yagumo. There were no clues about his father and mother. Then, when he visited the village where the black-haired people lived, Rio told the village chief his parents' names and his origins. It turned out the village chief knew his parents. She was his father's mother, which meant she was Rio's grandmother. Right now, all his relatives had passed away. Therefore, Rio was offered to stay there longer. Besides living with his grandmother, there was also his cousin named Ruri. Since they met, Ruri quickly became close with him. Rio also became the center of attention because he was dependable, while the boy named Shin didn't really like him. He felt jealous of his popularity and his skills in various fields. After Rio helped with hunting, he built a bath using his spirit arts. This brought Rio even closer to the girls and sparked jealousy from the boys there. When everyone was working, Shin got into trouble with the neighboring chief's son. At that time, Shin was trying to protect his younger sister who was being harassed by Gon. Meanwhile, Rio was still watching his movements. Just in case, he gave a magic stone to Ruri so she could protect him quickly. The next day, they had a guest named Hayate. He was an official from the kingdom tasked with inspecting taxes. In the evening, Rio trained alone. Then, Ruri and Sayo approached him and asked why he trained so often. Rio said there was someone he wanted to protect, but he was no longer in contact with her and didn't know where she was. Ruri said if that person was still alive, maybe they would meet again. Sayo also agreed with that opinion. When night fell, Gon and his friends snuck in to attack Ruri and Sayo. Rio immediately came and defeated all of them. This incident made him very angry. If he wasn't separated, Gon might have died at his hands. Hayate reported Gon to the kingdom. He would receive a fitting punishment for committing such a serious crime. The next day, the villagers were going to sell their harvest in the capital. Meanwhile, Hayate and his entourage would imprison Gon and deliver an important letter to his father. When they arrived in the city, Rio was taken to an eatery to eat a food called kamutan. Because Rio had saved his sister, Shin's treatment of him changed drastically. Rio was even asked to accompany his sister to eat at that place. The next day, Rio accompanied Sayo shopping. After shopping, Rio took her to an eatery to fulfill Shin's request. On the way, a merchant offered jewelry. Since they were in the city, Rio gave her the souvenir she wanted. Then, as they continued their journey, a kidnapping occurred. Rio immediately saved the victim and neutralized the kidnappers. However, not wanting to get involved in trouble, he immediately left the crowd without giving any statement. At the same time, Hayate delivered the letter to his father. They immediately went to find Rio to discuss a serious matter. Hayate's father was the person who served Ryo's mother, and Ryo's mother was from the Karasuki royal family. Zen was Ryo's father. He was a great soldier appointed to guard the royal family. Ayame, Ryo's mother, was the royal family member in question. Ayame loved Zen, but because of a problem with a prince in a neighboring country, they had to run away together, leaving the kingdom. After reading the letter and seeing Ryo in person, they were certain he was their descendant. That's why Ryo was asked to come to the palace to meet the queen and king. When Ryo met the queen and king, Ryo told them a little about his father and mother. His father died when he was little. Then, when he was 5 years old, his mother was killed by an adventurer who was his father's friend. Since then, he lived thinking only of revenge. The king understood this, but if he wanted revenge, Ryo had to be stronger than his opponent. For that, he was ordered to spar against the strongest warrior in the kingdom. The result was Ryo's skills were superior to the warrior's. With this, the king didn't need to worry about him anymore. After meeting the king, Ryo told Ruri that she was his cousin, even if not officially recognized. He also told her his relationship with the royal family. This situation made their relationship awkward, so they decided to become closer than before. Seeing Ryo and Ruri getting closer made the other girls feel jealous of her. Then, when Sayo found out Ryo would be leaving the village, she immediately felt a sense of loss. Unable to bear seeing his sister so sad, Shin begged Ryo to stay there. But Ryo had already decided he would leave next year. That's why Sayo took the opportunity to confess her feelings to Ryo. She was even willing to go with him, not wanting to be separated from him. Ryo couldn't return those feelings. He also couldn't take her because this journey was quite dangerous. After that, Ryo returned to visit the spirit forest. Not long after arriving, he was greeted by Latifa and the others. Then he recounted his experiences to the elders. This time, Ryo wouldn't be staying there too long. He just wanted to borrow knowledge from them to create a dwelling that could be moved. There was one way to make it. They could create a house without a foundation and carry it in a space-time storage. Because it required special preparation to make it, the matter of the house was left to Dominic. Meanwhile, Ryo could spend time with Latifa and the others. It had been 2 years since they last met. Sarah and Alma seemed to have become very shy. When Ryo said they had become beautiful young women, they couldn't hide their embarrassment. After that, Ryo fell asleep in his room. Then, when he woke up, suddenly there was a woman sleeping next to him. The appearance of this woman caused a misunderstanding, so Ryo asked a few questions and the reason why she was there. It turned out she was the humanoid spirit who had formed a contract with him. Ryo didn't remember ever making a contract with her. The spirit didn't know either because she had no memory of her past. Even so, she knew everything about Ryo, including his old life when he was in his original world. For now, Ryo was asked to name her. Then, Ryo gave her the name Aisha because she vaguely resembled someone he knew. A few moments later, Ryo took Aisha to meet the elders. At the same time, Dryas also came to meet her, sensing a very large spirit energy. As a fellow humanoid spirit, Dryas didn't understand why Aisha had no memories. Therefore, it would be best if they found out what kind of spirit Aisha was. Aisha said she might master all elements. To find out her power level, she was asked to demonstrate it by dueling against Ryo. As his contracted spirit, Aisha had fighting abilities equal to Ryo's. Or more accurately, she could copy all the skills possessed by her master. It didn't take long for the duel to turn into a heated battle. Dryas immediately stopped them because if it continued, the village would be destroyed. As a newly awakened spirit, Aisha was considered dangerous, so from then on,
Dryas decided she would teach her all her knowledge about spirits. A few days later, the house Ryo needed was ready. With this, he could continue his journey. Before leaving, the elders gave him something very valuable. He was given a teleportation device to travel back and forth to the village quickly. Also, because there were several parties still targeting him, the elders also gave him special earrings that could change his hair color at will. There was something Ryo had to do in the Beltram Kingdom. But before that, he would meet Celia to ask how she was doing. However, Celia was no longer at the academy. Reportedly, she was soon to be married to one of the nobles who used to bother him. Due to prolonged conflict, the kingdom was currently unstable. Charles was using the marriage to influence other nobles and increase his power. For the last time, Celia wanted to meet Rio. Deep in her heart, she had feelings for Rio and opposed the marriage. At that moment, Rio snuck into her room. He had returned to see her just as he promised 4 years ago. Rio's arrival made Celia very happy. For a moment, she forgot all her problems and the marriage. Then, when Rio asked about her marriage, her demeanor changed again. Celia immediately asked Rio to leave, not wanting to involve him. Because the meeting was so short, Rio couldn't figure out Celia's true feelings. Therefore, he immediately tried to find out the reason for the marriage. A few moments before the wedding ceremony began, Celia was introduced to Charles's wife. It turned out Celia was not his first woman. Charles already had many partners older than Celia. Because of this, Celia was treated poorly by them. She was threatened not to be arrogant and to be obedient to them. At that same time, Christina came to see her. She offered her congratulations on her marriage. Besides congratulating her, Christina also apologized for taking away her freedom. Because of the royal family's incompetence, Celia had to obey the powerful and sacrifice her happiness. Therefore, Christina apologized profusely. Even though Celia said this was her decision, Christina still felt guilty towards her. Not long after, the wedding ceremony began. Because Aisha had already done her investigation, Rio could decide what he would do next. When the wedding carriage had stopped, Rio created a disturbance by breaking through the guards. At that point, the kingdom's elite troops were deployed, but they were all powerless against him. With great ease, Rio defeated all of them. He also managed to reach Celia and stop Charles's movements. So the security forces would no longer attack. Rio held a weapon to Celia. At the same time, Rio used telepathy to speak directly into her mind. Before Celia was married, Rio asked what Celia's true desire was. He already knew this marriage was happening because of threats from them. If Celia wanted, Rio could stop it. He didn't want a day to come when the honor of the one who saved his life was trampled. Celia realized this marriage wouldn't make her happy. Therefore, she prioritized her feelings and asked Rio to take her away. Charles would not let Rio take Celia just like that. He deployed all his troops to capture him immediately. But no matter how many troops were deployed, they couldn't catch him. Their formation fell into chaos because Rio could avoid them. Despite running like this, Rio needed time to escape. So he decided to hand Celia over to Aisha, while he himself would fight all the guards who were still chasing him. The ordinary knights were dealt with easily. Then, when their commander arrived, Rio had a hard time with him. Alfred was not only skilled with a sword, he could also unleash a terrifying attack that could kill his opponent instantly. When Alfred unleashed his strongest attack, Rio used that opportunity to escape from him. A few moments later, Rio returned to Celia. Now, everything was fine. Rio had successfully saved Celia from a bleak future. But suddenly, a phenomenon occurred where people were transported to this world. One of them was the girl he used to like.